What's up, guys? Welcome back to Muscle Minds with Scott Stevenson. I'm Scott McNally. All of our programming is brought to you by TrueNutrition.com. You can use our code THINK for some additional savings on great supplements. Hit me up if you want to ask about flavors, anything like that. If you're in Canada, check out supplementsource.ca. You can get blowout deals, closeout products, short dated, label change, all sorts of good deals over there. We're also brought to you by Patreon. And listen, I appreciate the hell out of everybody who has been supporting the show over there. And this program, as well as all our programs, are brought to you by this book, Be Your Own Bodybuilding Coach. You can go to byobbcoach.com and you can put this up on your shelf like I do, because it makes you look, like I have fancy, nice things. Actually, this is a great book. I highly suggest it to anybody. For literally $100 or $60 for the ebook, you can literally do your entire season, your entire year yourself, all the way from planning to off season to getting on stage. Scott, what's up, man?
Someone says, "Who's your coach?" You just pull the book out and say, "This is my coach."
Yeah, I'm
this
my coach.
and my own brain. Yeah, I'm my own coach.
Actually,
one of the topics for today, I think the one we're going to lead with, is covered extensively in the book. Talking about essential amino acids and branched chain amino acids and protein synthesis, et cetera. Yeah, it's a monstrous. And you know what? We're speaking of John. That was one of the topics. One of the things I miss about John was getting together and just, we do videos. He does this, I think, with everyone, or did this with everyone. And he's just wing a topic. Said, "What should we talk about?"
Yeah.
And like one of my favorites was literally, I think we got done training and. He was talking about Mark Dugdale had been doing saunas, and he started doing saunas, and he's like, "I really don't know anything about him so much." I'm like, well, how about I write an article about him, because I don't know anything about him. So I wrote an article that's on Mountain Dog Diet. It's been up for a little while now, a few years. And this was a topic like that.
Okay.
He's like, "What's the deal with branched chain amino acids and essential amino acids?"
Yeah.
Because branched chain amino acids are such that they're like one of the biggest old school supplements.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And that was you're alluding to this question we had gotten in the previous episode, which, by the way, guys, if we use any of your questions for the show, they get entered into a monthly contest that True Nutrition is helping us with, Scott. So every question we use from YouTube or from Facebook or from Patreon, I'm entering them into a raffle, and if you win, you get a 3-pound bag of protein. So I'll be using a random generator to pick one lucky person per month. And I thought that was kind of cool of them to do.
Yeah, that's very cool. So, have you tried the cricket protein? Just not to get us too far off.
Does he still offer that? I know it was a thing for a little while. I don't know if anybody bought it.
I have a bag, but it was sitting. I got it to try on before the pandemic.
Yeah.
So it's been sitting for a while, and it's been in the heat, so it may not be so yummy.
Ugh.
But I just wondered.
No, yeah. I have not. But here is the question though that Scott was mentioning. Question for the next episode: what does Scott think of BCAAs versus EAAs? Scientists say BCAAs are more important because of mTOR activation. On the other hand, I've heard John Meadows recommend EAAs. Or do amino acid supplements matter at all if enough complete protein is consumed?
Okay, yeah, and I forgot that John was mentioning that question, because John had sort of suspected the EAAs, I think, just from kind of experience, and sort of made sense. And then I helped clarify with the article that I wrote, which I've then expanded upon. So here's the deal. There's such a really fascinating. I haven't really gone into it because I knew we wouldn't want to spend too much time on the area, but if you look at what happens, and this has been tested, like literally one of the essential amino acids at a time. The most important, sort of the king at the top of the hill, is leucine. That's one of the branched chain amino acids. They're named that way because of the chemical structure, and in particular, that R group, it's called, the part of the amino acid that's not the amino part, that can be stripped away and then used to produce glucose, is readily available in the branched chain amino acids. So one thing that happens, one reason why people are like, I got to use BCAAs, because we know that during endurance exercise, you preferentially oxidize the branched chain amino acids because they are very good fuel sources. So you see those stripped away from muscle. So you're in that scenario where you've woken up, you're starting to do cardio, you're fasted, and if you go really, really high in exercise intensity, I've seen values, I think, up to close to 10% of the energy can be derived from amino acids in a fasted state. So they got to take the BCAAs to prevent that. And you can, to some degree, supplement those branched chain amino acids that would be derived from your skeletal muscle with what you're taking in. So that's part of the deal. The big picture, which we covered many times before, I believe essential amino acids are the ones your body can't produce, and you'd be taking from your food. There's some conditionally essential as well. But those 9 essential amino acids, the body is very, very smart, and that those are the things that are necessary in order to really initiate muscle protein synthesis, because those are the essential supplies, the components of building the house on our quintessential construction site, the muscle cell. And without it, you're going nowhere. You don't have the nails, you don't have the 2x4s to build the house. You have to have those things. The other amino acids can be produced, they can be salvaged perhaps. You still want to have them all. If you just take essential amino acids and nothing else, you'll turn on protein synthesis. The system is set up to, okay, check. We got all those EAA check boxes in line. We can start the protein synthetic process. But if you don't take if you just took EAAs all the time, well, eventually, like, you're going to have to you're going to have to come up with amino acids to build the muscle somewhere else. So you go too far, and this has been studied. Churchward Venn is the name of the first author on this paper, really good one. You'll end up shooting yourself in the foot because your protein synthesis will turn off. You just don't have the availability of others. So the essentials are essential. They're the ones that trigger the protein synthesis. Leucine, one of the branched chain, leucine, valine, and isoleucine, those are the 3 branched chain amino acids. Leucine does the best job of turning on protein synthesis in terms of the magnitude. And then if you look at some of the downstream molecular signals that get evoked, leucine sort of stands alone as being pretty important. So it's kind of like you get your deliveries of all your essential supplies for turning on the construction project, and you're looking for kind of leucine to be on the package label. It's got leucine in it. Good. It's got all the others. Yes, good. Ready to go. Here's the thing, though. Because, well, let me toss this out because it's kind of an important point. There's actually, and I found a meta-analysis on this. It was done recently, too. There's actually a good amount of literature, and the meta-analysis supports this idea that branched chain amino acids do indeed, in and of themselves, you just take those, reduce muscle soreness. So that fits with the idea of reducing muscle breakdown because they're supplying those branched chain amino acids. Part of the metabolism that happens when you're in an exercise situation, let's say without the branched chain amino acids, or when those are there. There's a branched chain amino acid dehydrogenase enzyme, basically, that is the rate limiter for breaking things down. If you feed the muscle branched chain amino acids, you will tend to turn that on. The system is highly regulated, but the branched chain amino acids turn on proteolysis to some degree. So while you do indeed reduce breakdown and reduce soreness from the branched chain amino acids, just feeding the branched chain amino acids tends to increase turnover in the muscle. And in doing so, you can shoot yourself in the foot, and that you don't create a scenario where you've got positive protein balance. You turn on protein synthesis, you turn on breakdown, you can actually go the other way around. So just the branched chain amino acids is sort of like, I'm going to use an analogy, I'm just coming up with this. It's like you send in that big pallet full of what would normally be because you wouldn't find just a source of branched chain amino acids in nature.
Yeah.
The system's set up to think, someone's trying to trick me here with just the BCAAs. Normally you got those, you got all the EAAs, right?
Yeah.
So your workers start getting to work, and they're like, it's almost like they're trying to pound invisible nails because they haven't got the essential amino acids. And there's nothing's happening. There's just expending energy.
Huh.
So you set the system in motion. This is very generalized. I'm not being very specific intentionally with the biochemistry here, but you set the system in motion in a way that has some effects, which of course would contribute to a placebo effect. If you've got a reduction in muscle soreness, that is something that you notice specifically. That's something that's pretty powerful effect actually. That's something that could lend you to think, get you to think, something's going on here. And once the placebo's in effect, well, then you can just roll with that. You only need a couple exposures to something that you know because you've been very consistent, you've kept everything the same, and then you've added and taken out the branched-chain amino acids. Like, something's going on here. I just noticed I don't feel so wiped out. I don't feel so sore from my workouts. But in terms of muscle protein synthesis, you're not going to get much out of that. In fact, it goes the opposite direction. There were only a couple studies, and the first time actually it was demonstrated that you get an increase in protein breakdown was, I believe, in 1995. These two studies were with branched-chain amino acid infusions. They weren't even oral. And it was showing the negative effects. So we've known this for a long time. Somehow, BCAAs have sort of slipped in, probably because you got all those bits and pieces. It gets broke down preferentially if you don't have incoming food, insulin, to inhibit this, or branched-chain amino acids or another protein source. It sort of slipped into the idea like, yeah, we need the branched-chain amino acids because we don't want those to break down. We don't want to catabolize our skeletal muscle, into being like you just take BCAAs. And once you start spreading an idea, that idea will spread, especially if it's got an actual physiological effect like it does on muscle soreness. But the problem is you haven't got all the tools that you need, haven't got the other EAAs in place. So I found it's a kind of and I didn't have a chance to go and check all of these references to double check, but I'll just read this. This is from De Souza Santos et al. Isolated branched-chain amino acid intake and muscle protein synthesis in humans, a biochemical review from 2019. And this is very, very interesting. So there is a study that Bob Wolf had apparently missed in his review, but so muscle. I'll just read directly from this because it speaks right to the point. Muscle protein synthesis in response to isolated intake, 5.6 grams of BCAAs or placebo following resistance physical exercise was recently investigated in humans, young fit men. Within 4 hours, muscle protein synthesis was 22% higher in the treated group. Now remember, that's just protein synthesis. That's not what is happening with overall protein breakdown. We have this issue of increasing breakdown. But protein synthesis was 22% higher in the treated group as compared to the placebo group. In spite of statistical significance, this increase was 6 times lower compared to muscle protein synthesis of similar duration in response to the consumption of whey protein containing similar amounts of branched-chain amino acids and essential amino acids. So you compare just the BCAAs with a whole protein source, like whey, with the other essential amino acids, and you're getting 6 times the increase in protein synthesis. And there are 3 studies that are cited there. So which would you go with? Given the fact we know that basically you can eat almost as much protein as you can get down, it's not going to cause fat gain. It's not as if those calories just like spill over. You would like somehow be risking from, let's say, 50 grams of protein getting 120 calories loaded into the fat cells. It doesn't work that way. So you're getting more protein synthesis and you're avoiding the protein breakdown that comes with just feeding the branched chain amino acids. So the branched chains will help with soreness, but that leads us back to another important concept, is that you may want the soreness. You may want some of that breakdown to happen. Not everyone uses this terminology, but I hear lots of people now kind of getting on the idea that you've got an optimal amount of training that you want to do, optimal volume, optimal effort. Some people can do 15 sets and leave a few reps in the tank. Some people can do like they can only go with 7 or 8 sets in a week, let's say, but they just like go bonkers and they just take every set, to failure and maybe add some intensification techniques. So you go beyond that and it's too much. So you may be getting this effect on soreness in a scenario where you're taking the branched chain amino acids, just in a hypothetical situation, and it's reducing your soreness, and you're actually getting a negative protein balance out of the deal because of feeding the branched chain amino acids, turning on the degradation. You're reducing the soreness, which lends you to think, maybe I should just do more. So now you do more training than is your optimal because the BCAAs are having an effect. It's a different mechanism, but it's an effect that is similar to taking a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory or to using a megadose of an antioxidant like vitamin E or vitamin C. And those things can reduce muscle growth because they inhibit the whole inflammatory response or aspects of the signaling that comes in literally to tell your muscle cells there's a disturbance in our homeostasis. We've got some inflammation that's going on. There's a need to remodel, in particular to remodel hopefully with muscle growth in mind. So you start inhibiting the aspects of the stimulus from the training session that you've had. You're going to end up inhibiting what you're actually trying to evoke. You want the stress. You don't necessarily want to have zero soreness necessarily. Yeah. So that's a potential issue depending on the person. There's a lot of variability there, but basically if you look at the data, the branched chain amino acids are super important. There's no doubt. If you even had to say like which are the most important of the EAAs, you'd say the BCAAs. And then the logical leap that you take is like, I'm going to just use the BCAAs. Maybe I want to cut the 15 calories that I get from taking a full dose of EAAs. No, you just take the BCAAs, and now you've gone too far because the system isn't set up to negotiate just that input because it doesn't have all the building materials required for the building, but that sort of signals the building and it turns on breakdown in a way that would normally be helpful. If you want to have an accumulation of muscle protein, you're going to have some breakdown as well as some growth. There's actually an animal model, a transgenic mouse model, I believe, where they've, I think it may be that dehydrogenase enzyme that I mentioned, they've eliminated that. So basically that the animal has very little muscle breakdown, and you don't get muscle growth in response to these animal models of muscle growth. You need to have some breakdown. So the idea that if you could just blunt everything by with having no breakdown from a training bout doesn't make any sense. You're remodeling the whole thing. You're trying to build a bigger house. You need to knock down some walls so you can make bigger rooms, more myofibrils, larger myofibrils, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the breakdown needs to happen there. Anyway, that's my take on the BCAAs. It's an interesting, and they'll still sell because they do have that effect, and and the thing is, it's also a smart. I'm not trying to speak disparagingly about someone who uses BCAAs. If it's working for you, it may be just fine. It may be in a scenario like these studies are where someone is fasted, haven't had any food for 10 or 12 hours, and then they just use the BCAAs. Yeah. It may be that someone has eaten a meal before they train. A lot of people, they won't even bother going to train if they haven't had 2 or 3 meals. They got those other amino acids in the bloodstream already. So then they take the BCAAs, they're taking leucine. There may be an effect there that they're having just in that they're sort of re-triggering, and I haven't seen this study directly, but they may be re-triggering the protein synthesis, and they don't have any limitations in terms of the EAAs because they've got a meal with a complete protein in it that they took in hour and a half before training, so there's no problem. And now they've got a placebo effect. They've got their pre-workout ritual, and part of that is BCAAs. They've been taken, since day one or since when they first won their first show or got their pro card or whatever it may be. Yeah. And hell yeah, do that, because that system works, that may be very different than what's being tested in some of these studies where they've got very particular conditions that are set up just to evaluate the scenario where you're fasted, post-absorptive, you take in just BCAAs compared to a whole protein source. So can't just take the science and say, oh, that applies to me, because it very often might not. A lot of things that are done in studies are just proof of concept, which is what these studies basically are. Very few. Some people might get up and just take BCAAs when they do morning cardio, but many people who take it as pre-workout, or they bolster their intra-workout with BCAAs, maybe no issue, because it's very different scenario than what's going on in these studies I mentioned.
Yeah.
So
I remember my first contest. I used BCAAs with my AM fasted cardio, and I believe I was taking like 10 grams. And then as the prep went on, I was running out, so I started cutting it down to 5. And I didn't really time it out too well, because then I ended up just plain old running out. So I went from 10 to 5 to none with my fasted AM cardio, and I saw a noticeable difference in how fast I made progress. And of course, the diet had changed along the way too. So it's not like that was the only variable to the mix. But I started seeing myself getting leaner faster as I took less, and I saw myself actually like really getting lean fast when I had taken them out altogether. I definitely, for me at least, I noticed a difference, and so I'm kind of hesitant, because I used to think to myself like, oh, they're BCAAs. They it's almost like they didn't have calories. They didn't have to worry about it. I saw it as being this thing that wouldn't have any impact, but then I discovered that I think that it may have had an impact.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know. I mean, you're right. As far as calories go, that's nothing calorically.
Yeah.
It's 40 calories. When you had your full dose. There may have been a little insulin release, but then we're going back to this, the insulin theory of fat loss, which that's a whole other can of worms. Yeah, that's fascinating. The thing is, like, to some degree, if you've got something that's working, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah.
And if sometimes you just have to start when someone's starting out, you just do what everyone else is doing.
Right.
You look at people that are successful, and then you try to mimic those things or parrot those things or simulate what they're doing as best you can. It makes perfect sense. The real question is whether you should use EAAs or BCAAs.
Yeah.
And, in a scenario where you've got nothing or you've got those two choices, I go with EAAs.
Yeah.
If you have the choice of the whole protein, go with whey. Go with the whole protein source. That's complete. That's got, the high biological value, or, that's an animal source of protein, basically. The thing is, if you look...
Oh, good. Sorry. I'm sorry. I a little timing issue with our mics. Yeah, apologize. Sorry. Go ahead.
It's just if you break down the cost of the EAAs that you get in whey versus just EAAs, you're getting basically the same. It's usually a bit cheaper. Last time I did it, if you go to True Nutrition, for instance, you can check that out. So you're paid for the isolation of the EAAs, but you're not getting the other amino acids. So in a source like I mentioned before, in a situation where you're fasted, you want those other amino acids. It won't necessarily it's not going to make or break you, but imagine if all you did was take EAAs, you'd have none of those other non-essential amino acids coming in. They're going to have to come from somewhere else in order to synthesize any protein that you might be turning on the synthesis for with those EAAs. It's going to come from your own body proteins. Eventually, you're going to end up in a protein deficit, so to speak, because you don't have those non-essentials. You're going to need calories, of course, to make all this happen. We talked about that a couple of podcasts ago. But so you'd want the whole protein. There's very little scenario. I remember John, for instance, one time when he was pushing down. He's trying some different things out, and he pushed down for the last time, I think, the light heavy.
Okay.
And except for maybe when he did the Arnold Classic and looked just like outrageous, where he really had to push. He may have done this a little bit then too. People go to just protein only, protein and veggies, for long periods of time. He was doing like essential amino acids in between his meals, partly just to like have something to do, I think, partly to try to at least keep protein synthesis afloat to some degree.
Yeah.
And even like just to cut down on calories, just a little bit, just a wee tad. I don't know that, he probably would say, probably make a difference, but, sometimes just having the right, I think there's something to say for picking a strategy, feeling like you're in the driver's seat doing something, even if it may or may not make a difference, because then you have a sense of control as opposed to, and you've got all your I's are dotted, your T's are crossed. I am running this ship right where I want it to go to the finish line, as opposed to, imagine if you had no idea, like you're working with a coach or, all your sources of supplements and foods are just completely topsy-turvy. You have no control whatsoever, and you sense that. Oh, shit. You'd be stressed all to high heaven.
Yeah,
that's not a good place to be. Cortisol is not a helpful thing in exorbitant amounts when you're dieting down. So sometimes it's better to have maybe a plan that isn't physiologically perfect, so to speak, but one that you believe in, that reduces your stress levels, that creates those placebo effects, gets you like I'm going to go into my workout. I know I'm armored by this supplement, that supplement, this strategy, that strategy. I'm doing all the things to make sure I can train as hard as I want to, and I'm not going to bury myself and undo. I'm not going to drop 2 pounds of muscle during this workout where I'm on really low calories because I'm doing all these other things. So it gives you a sense of security, so to speak, to attack your workouts in the way you need to and do the other things that you need to make sure you're as successful as possible. So there's something to say for doing what works and doing what you believe in, even though it may not be the smartest thing from a physiological or scientific sense necessarily.
Yeah. And I know we talked about this before. If you were to use EAA, is there a certain amount that you would say would be enough, but maybe not too much? Because I've experimented with everything from 5 to 25 grams of EAA, and I know that going up to 25 was probably a little bit on the high end.
Yeah, you can get an effect just from 6 grams.
Okay. Some
of the early studies were just using 6 grams. I think if you take, I have to go and check the numbers. I think if you looked at what you might get, it's interesting. If you look at just the muscle protein synthesis, 40, maybe for a big person, 50, 60 grams of whole protein pretty much has topped you out. You're not going to get anything more. More higher doses of protein. There's even, it's actually a Bob Wolf who wrote the nice review from a few years ago on EAAs that I referred to earlier. He's got some interesting data, on whole body protein synthesis that kind of shows there doesn't seem to be any whole plateau there. You could just take in more protein. Of course, that's not true. You can look at that sort of metabolic data. Here's the thing that gets people. You look at some of the whole body metabolic data on increasing protein doses and what happens with protein balance, and it kind of suggests the sky's the limit or something like that.
Yeah.
But we know that's not the case. You look at Jose Antonio's stuff with 3.6 and massive amounts of protein. And in the one study, it was 1,000 calories almost on average for an average sized bodybuilder per day of extra protein, and there was no muscle growth. Now they did, and there's no change in body composition compared to the other group.
Yeah.
So it didn't add fat, but it didn't enhance muscle growth in any way.
Yeah.
They didn't combine that with massive amounts of food. There might be a different scenario where you took someone and put them into a massive caloric surplus, such that they may be getting a good amount of fat. So take that same study and then add another 1,000 calories of carbs on top of that, or a mixed macro diet. So put them at instead of 3,000 calories, put them at 4,500, 5,000. you probably get some fat spilling over, but you have plenty of energy around to fuel the muscle growth. Haven't seen that study done. That's in, is it 101, 102, episode 101, 102, we talked about nutrition.
Yeah.
And some of the massive feedings. Like, those are the studies that you have a hard time getting people to commit to as subjects, because you got to eat so much food. Those are hard. Those have an adherence issue, because those are brutal. Just take some pills or drink a supplement, and maybe you can tell it's there. Hopefully they've hidden it so there's no placebo effect. But take a study like, okay, we're gonna overfeed you consistently for the next 3 months. And you get dropout from gastric distress, all the things that happen when people just don't want to bulk. Bulking is very, very difficult.
Yeah.
So you do like a true bulking study, and you do this in a scientific context where you're like the way that it's done, obviously, with coaching, most of the time, not everyone always does this, is that you add calories given the feedback you're getting. How is the person's strength changing? You don't want to gain like 3 pounds every week. That's too fast.
Yeah.
In almost every situation, unless you're like, you're just putting on water like in a few days after a show or something. So you titrate things, you adjust things, in a very individualistic manner. Well, if you're going to test a condition in an overfeeding study like that, the question is, if we take this very specific approach and apply it to our sample from this population of highly resistance-trained bodybuilders, what happens? And can we say that if we add 2,000 calories to their caloric balanced diet, that they get X amount of muscle growth, and we've also added an extra 100 grams of protein, something like that?
Yeah.
So everyone has to do that. Now, for some people, they might grow like weeds. They got good genetics, based on how far they are along their law of diminishing returns spectrum. Like, have they grown only 10 pounds since they started, and they have a lot more left in the tank because they really haven't pushed the food before? Maybe there's someone who's already put on 70 pounds, and for them to get 2 pounds of muscle is like just a miracle.
Yeah. So
you end up with the scenario like the studies that we've talked about here. It's also in one of those 101, 102, 103, where the first study, they looked at frequency of training, and they saw there was no difference. It didn't matter 2, 3, or 5 times a week. And they looked at the individuals, and some people did better with higher, some people did better with lower, some people just grew like weeds, some people didn't grow with either. So you're answering a different question with those group studies as opposed to what might work best for the individual. So anyway, as far as the protein goes, I think I lost my train of thought. I jumped too many times from the original question.
I'm just taking it all in.
Yeah. So, as far as your question, as far as essential amino acids, once you get to maybe like 10 or 15, that's what you're going to get in a protein dose of maybe 60, something like that, 50 to 70. You're already at a protein dose that's plenty to maximally turn on protein synthesis.
I gotcha.
Where I was talking about this whole body protein synthesis idea and the limitations of the studies, because there aren't studies that just show like, what if we just massively bulk someone with lots of protein while they're training? There's the studies that we talked about, but that's just about it. There's like 3.
Okay.
So the essential amino acids in a dose of let's say 15 grams. That's plenty to turn on protein synthesis in almost all situations. If protein breakdown is very rarely measured, it's methodologically very difficult to do. So that's kind of the assumption is that it always is about 1/3 of the protein synthesis. I believe that's the number that I've read, is that they sort of, based on like 2 or 3 studies, that they just sort of presume that's the case. They sort of presume that's a constant, but that's not been in skeletal muscle, but that's not been assessed regularly across a range of protein intakes to know what the true protein balance is. There's just kind of an underlying assumption. So it's hard to say whether, if you took in 25 grams of essential amino acids, if that would have a differential effect versus just 6.
I got you.
On protein balance. That's what matters. You got breakdown and synthesis. So whether you're in a positive scenario, positive protein balance, or a negative protein balance is what matters. So 25 might be, that's good insurance. There might be an effect on breakdown. I don't know. So that's why bodybuilders do this. They figure out, what might make sense, and they just add a little insurance. They take a little bit extra.
Of course.
Which, in terms of protein with healthy kidneys, in this scenario, the calories are minimal. If you go from, let's say, 10 to 20, that's an extra 40 calories, something like that. It's not a big deal. It's probably not going to hurt you, except maybe in your wallet. So it's not a bad thought, but the data aren't there that I'm aware of to dig in and say, oh yeah, like when you don't start having a massive effect on limiting protein breakdown until you get up to 20 grams of essential amino acids.
Okay.
And the thing is, you don't necessarily want that, because you want some protein breakdown and some stimulus for protein turnover, so that you can continue to have the remodeling from your workout. The difference would be off season versus trying to limit that breakdown pre-contest. So I still think that the protein, and we know this pretty solidly, when you give whole protein, when someone's dieting down, they're in a caloric deficit. There's even a pretty cool, it's a short study from Stu Phillips' group where, it was with women, and it was only like 4 weeks maybe, but they loaded them up with like, was it 3 or 4 grams per kilogram? So higher than that, like 2.2 is sort of the upper end of the range that comes from various ways of looking at what you need when you're training in terms of protein. But they were dieting down, they're in a deficit, and these women actually grew muscle while they're in a really severe, they were like 800 calories a day. It was like,
no kidding.
It was really rough. I could look it up real quick, but it was a rough caloric deficit. So the whole protein is still a better choice, unless you feel like you're being blessed by a unicorn when you use essential amino acids as opposed to whole protein. Then the whole protein is the way to go. It's just what your body's set up to metabolize. It's what the system needs in terms of all those amino acids. There's very little reason, and this goes for also like studies, and this is in my book and on the article on John's site, just to like try to soup up your protein source with more protein, with more essential amino acids. If you're taking in a vegetarian protein, that makes sense, but you've got a whole protein, a complete protein, with good amino acid score, then protein digestibility corrected amino acid score. Let's say that's what has for a long time been sort of the main way of evaluating protein value. If you got a good score, you've got a good animal source of protein, then you're not really doing anything, and you take in enough. Yeah. You're not really doing anything. You're kind of like, you're splitting hairs. You're like, what if I took in 15 grams of whey protein and then I added like 6 grams of EAA? So like,
hey, I was thinking it already.
I know this, because I would think that too. Like, like what are the advantages? Well, the advantages could be a placebo effect. Because you're like, ooh, I got to be the evil scientist. Like, I put together this perfect pre-training ritual of this. I got a little bit of this. I got every supplement known to mankind. I had someone message me. I feel for him too. Like, it's been a few weeks ago now, and he's like, I need help. Like, it was almost like, he stood up at the meeting. He said, my name's John, and I'm a bodybuilding supplement addict. Yeah. Because he's like, I've gotten to where I'm reading, like, you read like examine.com, phenomenal source. Yeah. There's literature suggests all sorts of things can be effective. So you start like, I'll add that, and I'll add that, and I'll add that. And next thing you know, like, holy shit, I'm spending just as much money on supplements as I am on food. And both of those exceed my rent. Like, what's going on here? I've gone overboard. So I mentioned this in regards to just supplements in general, like heart care supplements, those sorts of things. is that if you look at, like, so let's take, I'm going to take berberine and curcumin and resveratrol, and you start adding all those, eventually you end up having overlapping mechanisms. So it kind of applies here with a whole protein source and essential amino acids. If I take in whey protein, which has essential amino acids in it, and then I take in essential amino acids to get essential amino acids, it's like, why don't you just take in more whey protein, or just use the right amount of whey protein?
Yeah.
Well, because it feels cooler to use a bunch of little things, but you do got to run and you got to watch out for the fact, like, I'm just, it's like I'm using a nail and I'm using a screw, and they're both doing the same thing. It's like, do you really need them both? No, they're basically holding the board down. You don't need to use both types of implements.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
All right. Listen, so I know you had a couple other things here that you'd picked out from the previous episode. One of them was elevating the bed during peak week. I know we talked about that not too long ago. Head down tilt. Is there anything you wanted to brush up on with that one?
I couldn't remember because I talk about these things,
we did
clients
we talked about it not too long ago. We did a whole segment on it. What about you know what? I've got one that I didn't mention to you. It related to left ventricle hypertrophy, and it was from one of our Patreon guys. I'm not sure if you have anything on this, and if not, we could always come back to it. But basically, he had found he had some mild left ventricular hypertrophy, 6'4", 260. So he's a big dude, and he's been doing bodybuilding for the last 20 years. The doctors told him that it was minor and that it would be expected for someone his size. Blood pressure while on cycle has never gotten extremely high, 140/90 in the past. But now he's been using a little bit of Cialis at times, 5 milligrams, and he got his doctor to put him on telesmartin. And he said that his blood pressure is 105/70. And he adds, at what reading should someone cut back on blood pressure medication, assuming the person feels good and doesn't get dizzy?
Obviously a question for his doctor.
True. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's the interesting thing is that, and I don't see this mentioned too often, so I guess it bears repeating. Just like he mentioned, he's got it. Like a bigger person should have a higher blood pressure. That's typically what you'd see. If you look at, like, you can imagine the blood pressure. There's some variability across species, but the blood pressure in an elephant is going to be higher than the blood pressure in a mouse.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. You're going to expect those things, So there's some scaling with body size. It probably scales with body surface area or something like that. But in terms of the tissue, what we're concerned about, well, a couple things. You've got your kidneys, and then you've got also the endothelium as far as cardiovascular disease and those sorts of things that are associated with having high blood pressure. You don't want to be, if you're a larger person, it doesn't mean, like, I'll use a truck example. You get an F-150 and get an F-350, and they're going to have different size leaf springs and different size suspension on them because it's a bigger truck. If you're a human that's 100 pounds versus a human that's 300 pounds, it doesn't mean you get kidneys that are equipped differently, like the two different trucks have different size leaf springs.
Yeah. You
still get a pair of kidneys, they're going to be bigger kidneys, but the working parts in those kidneys, the glomeruli, are going to be the same, and the filtration in the glomeruli is going to be the same. The Bowman's capsules, everything else that goes into the how the kidney does its job is going to be the same, and the endothelium that you have, generally speaking, everyone has variabilities because of their genetics, but you've still got human endothelial tissue in your vasculature. And so one of the issues is that you can just stress your kidneys out with the high blood pressure. Kidneys they're sensing this and producing renin. They're part of the renin-angiotensin system, aldosterone system. And also, if you're someone who's got high blood pressure and you've got shitty blood lipids, part of the mechanism whereby you're going to get a clot or atherosclerosis is that you've got more blood pressure driving the blood through the system, and you've got these lipids. If you've got a poor lipid profile, you've got little, you call them, like you use the term micro tears. You've got an inflammatory process that can happen there because the blood's constantly rushing through the vasculature, and the cells and all the components, the proteins, everything of inside the blood is banging up against the inner tube, that vascular endothelium within the blood cell, and you can get plaquey streaks laid down there, which can then basically become sort of kind of a scar, so to speak. You get infiltration with macrophages. You can find some really awesome figures online demonstrating the whole mechanisms that are involved there. But the greater the pressure, you can imagine which hose is going to have the greatest wear and tear in it. Imagine this hose is pumping concrete, let's say. So there's, it's pretty rough what's coming through the hose. A hose that is under high pressure, or a hose that's, just sort of like pumping out at an easy rate.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the higher the pressure, the greater the stresses, the physical stresses. And in that environment of inflammation, being generally inflamed, and the wrong kind of lipids in terms of those fatty streaks being laid down, you end up with a scenario where you can have a clot formation, or you have advanced cardiovascular disease, and you get, there's actually the sort of the craziest pictures are for studies where they've taken, they use macaques, they use other primates, not humans, and they give them an atherogenic diet. You can look up like macaque or simian, and then atherogenic, and you see like literally like the controls have like, they look at one of the arterial vessels, the coronary vessels, and the controls look like this, and maybe there's like maybe a little thin streak, like nothing there as far as atherogenesis, and then the ones in the atherogenic diet, like they eat basically what humans who dine on McDonald's and typical standard American diet. There's like a little itty bitty hole for the blood to go through. They've got some major occlusion there. That's where you get ischemia in your heart. So anyway, he's a big guy. He should have higher blood pressure because he's bigger, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's okay to have the higher blood pressure, because he's still got the same vascular endothelium that other humans would have.
Sure.
So lower is going to be general, and the epidemiological data tell us this without a doubt. It's so variable, though, as to whether someone's going to end up getting atherosclerosis or be at a risk for a heart attack based on their blood lip and those sorts of things. I've looked for this, and I'm not going to conspiracy theory here, but I've looked so many times to try to figure out statistically, and maybe someone out there has found this, or there's a study that I've just missed, or a review or something, of if you look at like your major factors for cardiovascular disease, so being overweight, high blood pressure, poor lipids, family history, what have you. Family history is going to take up a big part of this, but if you eliminate that and look at the things your controllable factors, as they're known, what percentage of the variability in risk for heart attack or a cerebrovascular event, a stroke, deep vein thrombosis, what have you, what percentage is accounted for by those factors? So can we say, if we know these things, we can predict 50% of the variability and risk among individuals? I think it's a relatively small amount. There's a lot of it which just happens, so we're not quite sure why necessarily. It's probably genetic. If you're crappy diet, like there's things you can change, and the extent to which you can change those varies. Kind of like, why do some people grow so well as bodybuilders? Well, they've got good genetics for it. There's a bunch of things go into it. You can take any two clients and put them on the same diet, and like you can get highly variable results from individuals. So back to his question then. The main thing with low blood pressure is going to be your risk of passing out. As far as I know, I'd have to look this up, but as far as I know, there's, as long as your blood pressure is in a physiologically functional range. I'm speaking now not as a doctor, but as a physiologist. As long as you're in a physiologically functional range, then meaning you don't like I had a girlfriend years ago who used to have low blood pressure, she'd have low blood sugar too, but everything was kind of low. And probably because she like work all day long and not drink anything, so she'd get dehydrated because she didn't want to go and pee because she was so busy, you know.
Yeah.
The situation like I think she was working at one point behind a desk, and she literally was the only customer service person there.
Yeah.
So she literally, as my mentor, Dr. Dudley, would say, sometimes I'd walk past him in the hall, you know, we're both kicking ass. He's doing his thing, and I'm doing my thing, and I'm like, I say, "What's happening, Doc?" He's like, "Too busy to take a shit." I loved it because he'd say that no matter when, you know. And sometimes there'd be like, you know, students walk by who are on tour, you know, and they'd see like, I'd say, and that sometimes I said, "How are you, Dr. Dudley?" And he'd say, "Too busy to take shit." And everyone would say, "Oh, that's Dr. Dudley. He could be my teacher." And you could see some of the students be like, "Oh, fuck yeah, I'm going here. I like these people." And some of the parents were like, "We're paying for this?" Thank God this is in-state tuition, you know? Anyway, so as far as low blood pressure goes, you know, that's probably, you know, my blood pressure tends to be low. It tends to run like 100 over 60.
Okay.
You know, something like that. Like, actually, it's even been as low as like 80. Or I remember once I took it, and this was when I was probably at least 240, 250.
Yeah.
And I was measuring my own blood pressure, which I'd done for years, but I was preparing for a lab, exercise phys lab, and measuring my own blood pressure while I was riding an exercise bike at rest, and I kept on measuring it, and I'm like, man, this damn cuff is broken. Is this the right size? Like, this is a big cuff. I need this cuff. And my blood pressure was like 70 over 45 or something.
Holy crap. Wow.
And I wasn't like, you know, feeling woozy or dizzy or anything like that. So he's probably okay, but check with his doctor. He mentioned Cialis, and like Viagra. One of the things, you know, with Viagra, why is it actually, you know, causes, that's one of the side effects, particular is low blood pressure. People like, you know, starting to faint, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
The only thing I can think of other than sort of throw out is that I haven't seen this as far as resistance exercise goes, but there are data showing that overall being exercise trained, doing endurance training, reduces your risk of cardiovascular disease. Obviously, you know, most of the risk comes from just getting out of the couch potato category, you know, and just being, you know, recreationally active and not being someone who just, you know, Netflix and chill with, you know, takeout or whatever all the time.
Yeah.
But once you're exercising, that's a stress on your cardiovascular system, and there is an increased risk of. I saw this depicted once years ago in a paper, and like throughout the day, the risk. Let's say the risk is cut in half on average. You know, for someone who's cardiovascular, who's an endurance exerciser, you know, a runner. So they might have, it's on average throughout a 24-hour period, they might average at like 40 or 45% the risk, except when they exercise, their risk goes up, you know, to above the average, and then it drops back down, but the overall 24-hour average is less.
Okay.
So that's good. If you do like leg press, and do a Valsalva, they've measured blood pressures at like 400 over 200.
Holy shit.
At the femoral artery, yeah. Which is not typically where you measure it, but it's, you know, it's represented what you get the brachial artery, relatively speaking. So, yeah, you get super high blood pressure. So there's a risk, you know, of a cardiovascular incident, you know, by exercise training. So he's taken Cialis to bring it down. I don't know, you know, I have to see, like, mechanistically, that may bring his blood pressure down like to some degree during those lower blood pressure points during his workout, like between his sets.
Yeah.
But during this all out go for broke set, you know, like a deadlift or a bent over row, and that's when you're doing a Valsalva. If you're breathing, it helps substantially. But he may not, like the Cialis may not be doing anything in that regard, you know, during those times. I haven't seen that study directly because it's sort of like it's analogous to taking in carbohydrates. There's a whole other story to this, but you can take in carbohydrates while you're exercising, and there's some data that suggests if you're doing endurance exercise, it may slow the rate of glycogen use. But if you're doing all-out exercise, like let's go for broke, you're just calling upon that glycogen because the glycogen's there. It doesn't matter how much glucose you have in the system. You're going to use the glycogen at the same rate. So if you're doing like a leg press or a squat and you're holding your breath and you're just going after it, your blood pressure is going to be high. Maybe it's instead of 400 over 200, it's 390 over 185 or something like that. But it's still sky high. The Cialis is probably making no difference potentially during those high-risk moments during the exercise session. I don't know. I'm guessing it probably is completely overridden by the fact that you've got all that weight on your back or you're moving all that weight around and you're holding your breath doing a Valsalva. So he might, if he tends to Valsalva, he might be best, paying attention just to that. It's, good breathing as far as bringing your blood pressure down as opposed to, taking a drug like Cialis or Viagra.
Yeah.
So,
he was using a blood pressure medication too.
Yeah, Thomas-Harton.
Yeah.
And that's a strategy. Obviously, Victor Black has made that very, very big, very, very well known. You can use ARB blockers as well.
Okay.
I don't know if that's going to do anything during the workout.
Yeah.
That's a side effect too of your blood pressure going too low on those. So you have to look into that. But as far as he's as being as long as he's in physiological range and he's not blacking out, talk to his or getting dizzy or what have you. I'd have him talk to his doctor about that because he didn't mention what he is on or off the Thomas-Harton, did he?
You know what? He might have. Let me see here really quick because it was a long message. I think he did. No. Oh, wait. He says usually he was 140 over 90.
Okay.
Yeah, blood pressure on cycle was. He said my blood pressure went on cycle. Doesn't get extremely high, usually 140 over 90. And then he said, I've convinced my doctor to put him on the medication to help hopefully reverse left ventricle hypertrophy. That's what his overall goal is here. He said to possibly get that to change.
So I think they made a good decision based on the blood pressure. If he's got, he probably had an echocardiogram done. So to know, I don't think he mentioned that at all. But you guys look at his ejection fraction from the echo. Yeah. See if there's any issues there. That would be the kind of the problem you're running into. It's normal to get. You've got an overload stress on the heart from training, from holding your breath, and just the fact that your blood pressure is going to go up. It's totally normal to have some thickening of the left ventricle from resistance training. That's a normal adaptation to the deal. Depends on how much it is, and what you see with someone who's got a pathological thickening there is that they've had the chronic blood pressure elevation and they've got poor ejection fraction. So you've got a pathological functioning of the heart in conjunction with the thickening as opposed to a positive adaptation that's just helping. It means his heart has adapted somewhat to the high blood pressure stresses of the training, and it's normal. And as far as that goes, as far as I know, there's no adverse consequences to that normal amount. But that's kind of the thing, is like you need to look at the echo, and echoes can end up being, you can get different numbers. There's different ways to estimate the ejection fraction based on the images, and I can't remember the details there, but that can give you different values. I've had clients, corresponded with people, talked with John about this a good bit, back when he had his heart attack, and trying to figure out what's going on, because he had some, and I can't remember the information there, but he had some times then when he's like, what's going on with his ejection fraction, and trying to tease that all out, and he was like asymptomatic. He had no issues whatsoever. He's like I've got clearance now, everything looks good, things are getting better, and he was going to the gym and just burying people. He wouldn't say it that way. It's like, yeah, we trained, man, and like I'm just going, like he's just kicking ass.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's so many details there that I can't even
Sure.
I can't even take much of a stab at without having, an echo to look at or something. And I can't interpret those things legally anyhow. But
Absolutely.
yeah, it sounds like his doctors, they're on getting the 140 is sort of the break-off point. The 140 over 100 or 140 over 90. Like he's sort of at the, borderline, even beyond borderline hypertension where he was. And now he's back down to, 110 over whatever he said. So that's good. That sounds good to me, man. I'd be happy with that personally.
What about Nick Weary's with us? A competitive eater. Nick Weary, one of the best in the world. He was asking about Arjuana. He said, "Is that possibly a nice
Arjuna?
Arjuna is that? I don't know this supplement, but he said I think that it's been shown to increase left ventricle ejection fraction."
Yeah, that's Himalaya Wellness, Himalaya Herbal supplements. It's known as Heart Care, or Arjuna is in Heart Care. Yeah, I was actually. It's funny enough because I have some in the other room, and I thought about putting a post up. I mentioned that to somebody. I can't remember when.
Yeah.
It all kind of the consults and everything all kind of blends together. But that's a great. That's in my book actually. If you buy the PDF or you can just go to the references in the back, dig through them. There you go. Yeah, that's a great supplement. They've got like multiple versions of their website, but you can find the scientific documentation there.
Huh. Okay.
It's a really good supplement. Yeah. Carditone.
Oh, yeah.
Is one that a lot of people use for blood pressure. That seems to work pretty well.
Yeah.
It's been around for forever. So
as far as
Arjuna has some effects on lipoproteins too, so it's a very good supplement.
For heart remodeling, I've heard from Dante that ubiquinol or coenzyme Q10 could be really beneficial. I started experimenting with it, and I started running it at what I think is kind of a higher dose, because I've seen people using it like 100 to 200 milligrams up. They say up to 6 for some things. And I started about a month ago this experiment with 400 milligrams of ubiquinol. And as far as like long COVID symptoms, I feel like it's actually been helping me about a month in now. Like that and the injectable L-carnitine are like the two out of all the supplements I've been experimenting with this past year. I feel like those two so far have been really helpful. And then there's another, what is it? He suggested it was a stronger form of curcumin, better than Super Bio. I guess starts with an M.
Yeah.
But anyway,
I've got a curcumin article. Yeah,
I've got that on order, so that should be here in the next couple of days. I'm going to try to ramp that up too and throw that into the mix.
Yeah.
See what I get out of it.
Yeah, I just got a question. Actually, just an email question. People find me all sorts of ways. They send me questions, and I have multiple correspondences going on about CoQ10 because it's an antioxidant, but it's also in the mitochondrial chain. So. It has sort of multiple functions. And the thing is, in your situation, Scott, the thing we talked about or went back and forth is that does this work like cysteine or vitamin E
Mariva.
Or vitamin C? What's that?
Was it Mariva? That was it.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's the name of it. Yep. And yeah, it going to have free radical quenching. Actions, and you can run into that situation where you sort of limit the stress that you're trying to evoke with training by using CoQ10, but it's all a matter of how much at what rate it's getting used up. So you've got this situation. We know if you're looking at like D-dimer and things that are involved with inflammation and clotting, and like this scenario with your long COVID, like people are just untangling that. We don't know what the hell's going on there necessarily.
Yeah.
So you may have an elevated need for quenching free radicals. Your antioxidant status may be categorically different. I think it is. Like just the things that we've talked about, like that. The relative ease or difficulty with which you go through your average day is substantially higher than it was before this happened.
Oh yeah.
You know, so like all sorts of things. And I don't know how much you've shared on the podcast, but it's just imagine someone, because you ain't a complainer, that's for sure. But it's like, imagine like if everything, like all of a sudden you got 100-pound, weighted vest on you, and you have to run everywhere, instead of walk. Like you recognize that that's there, it's like I gotta go to the grocery store. Like it's gonna be like you're in your, you're before like the light at the end of the tunnel is the contest. I'm almost there. You're in like that 3-week out period where you're totally dieted down, but you're not close enough to contest that you're getting excited. And like everything is just like monumental. It's like, I got to get up and go to the bathroom. Oh my God, I don't know if I want to do it. It's so hard. Yeah. That's stressful.
Yeah.
So everything's stressful. So you may have a higher need for something like CoQ10. In your case, especially because of its roles in energy transfer. And the heart is just such an energy badass. It goes all the time. It's constantly active.
Yeah.
Until the end. And it is an oxidative machine. It can take whatever you feed it. Like they do. Like one way that's the heart is studied is with an isolated heart model where they take the heart out like a rat. You can use different animals. A rat is what I've seen done, and they take the heart out and you can feed it like an artificial blood, basically, and you can give it glucose, you can give it lactate, you give it free fatty acids, give it ketones, give it anything that's got a carbon chain on it, and it will oxidize the shit out of that motherfucker.
No kidding.
It's like a military multi-fuel vehicle. The ones that I'm thinking about, like the Apocalypse vehicle. You can put chicken grease in there, and motor oil, and gasoline, and diesel. Biodiesel, it doesn't matter. It's just you pour it in, it will use it,
Yeah.
That's kind of what the heart is. So your heart, even despite the fact that the heart's, amazing, like your heart is part of what's going on, what you're trying to evaluate and get up to speed here with your scenario. So it makes your heart's getting more stress than the average person.
Yeah.
And just by nature, like one of the primary sources of free radicals is superoxide radical. So if you look at the energy chain, electron transport chain, and ATP production, oxidative phosphorylation in muscle cells, you've got electrons that are being moved around in this electron transport chain. You've got oxygen that's being used up, and you've got water that's being produced. And there's about, like, on average, I think it's like a 3 to 5% kind of error rate, in that you get sort of like a packing error, Like Amazon's pretty good. They don't even have that much of a rate, but every once in a while you just get the wrong thing, it gets misdelivered, what have you. Uh-huh. That happens in the mitochondria, and you get an electron loaded onto an oxygen, and you get a free radical that needs to be quenched. So literally exercise, this is one of the ways in which exercise increases free radical stress and stimulates the need for, in this case, thinking particularly about a mitochondrial biogenesis. Is that that stress comes from this error in oxidative phosphorylation. You make free radicals. The system says, shit, this is a stimulus for having more mitochondria, because obviously we're going to be making more free radicals. That means we're making more energy at a faster rate. We need more mitochondria. You also upregulate enzymes like catalase and superoxide dismutase and glutathione peroxidase, all the enzymes that are involved with free radical quenching, so your body adapts. But you're also using up the endogenous free radical quenching molecules that you can't produce. Things like vitamin E and vitamin C, vitamins, and CoQ10 is right along in there has multiple functions, but right in there as a free radical quencher. So there's just no doubt in my mind, I don't know how much, but you are someone who can certainly benefit from you have a higher need, I believe, for antioxidants in your diet or coming in some way, shape, or form. So it doesn't surprise me whatsoever, given the way all your sort of paths converge to energy production and stress, free radical production, that CoQ10 would be helpful for you, without a doubt.
That makes total sense, man. And that's kind of what Victoria was thinking too. That's exactly what she was thinking as well. And that both of those things would help, the coenzyme Q10 and the L-carnitine. They'd both be a benefit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So. Yeah.
Anyway,
they work synergistically.
We have anything else here on our list, Scott? You had mentioned YouTube factoids. But I wasn't sure where you're going with that.
No, it's just kind of a simple thought. So sometimes, YouTube it's a free for all comment wise, of course, and we get lots of awesome comments and questions, but sometimes people say, "Oh, well, this is the answer to this question that you didn't have an answer for," or what have you. And I want to know, like, personally, I like to know where that information comes from. So I've seen this just a couple of times, and it happened on one of the videos. I was digging around some old videos looking for questions for today, and I saw a couple of times where people said, "Oh, well, this is why." And I'm like, okay, but I have no idea where you found that because I haven't found that, and I've looked. So if you have a scientific factoid, does this, I would love to know where people found that, just so I can dig into it and because in my quote unquote line of work, you got to back up, as Dudley would say, show me the data.
Yeah.
If you're going to say that this does that, or this is metabolized into that, or we know that this happens when you do this, and it's a very science. It's not like, well, I have found this to be the case. It's like this is a biochemical process. Well, there's going to be some science somewhere that came from.
Absolutely.
And if you just say, I've always heard that this is the case, like, okay, that's cool, because that's totally. But if you say it black and white, if you have the data, if you have a paper, back it up. It doesn't hardly ever happen, and in the science world, actually, as I've mentioned many times before, if you don't cite information, it can be considered an academic integrity violation.
Oh,
not to appropriately, it's literally it's not the same, but it's along the lines of plagiarism, because you're making unsubstantiated statements. You just need to say, like, give a source. It's okay to make an error, like, oh, I thought it was in that paper, or that paper, like, the paper could be fraught with errors.
Mm-hmm.
But at least you're saying, we know that when you do this, this happens, and if you back it up with a paper that was just awful, that's full of holes and really doesn't very well substantiate what you're saying, at least you said, this is what this is the source of this information. Yeah. But if you have no source, I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to try to track that down because I've looked and I haven't found that. So I would just would love to know. So that's just a request to anywhere and everywhere, But YouTube seems like that's a kind of a common theme.
Yeah. I don't. I've got one more here, Scott. This is from our live feed here, and he also said it's kind of long. So if we wanted to skip it, I get it. He said, from Anthony, he says, I am simplifying a lot here, so please help me out. NAC allows the introduction of cysteine in the neuron, thus producing glutathione. This happens in all body cells, but I will focus on the neuron. So far, so good. While cysteine enters the neuron cell, glutamate also exits it and tethers to the GLU2, not sure of the name, a receptor specific to glutamate, that is, uniquely an inhibitor receptor. Having activated the GLU2 now, the glutamate is unable to reach the adjacent, what's that word there? Synthetic space. Synaptic space. Okay. Mm-hmm. And ultimately excite the neuron cells. As a cascade of non-excitement, this should be extremely relaxing and allowing for beneficial sleep. Am I correct? Can you kind of go over what he's saying here? Because I'm not sure. I'm trying to read it and understand it at the same time, so I don't feel like I'm doing a good job here.
Yeah. I mean, I have to see where he's. This would be a great example of where he drew this information, because he's not sure the name of this receptor.
Okay.
So he's just sort of remembering this. So he's asking about if, and N-acetylcysteine provides a source of cysteine that has an effect in the brain via a glutamate receptor that would lead to someone being more relaxed and being able to fall asleep again. So the thing that's so interesting about brain research that I found is that it's almost, we're still sort of in the dark ages a little bit in terms of looking at neurotransmitters and things that bind to receptors, because so often people are not paying attention to what area of the brain that takes part in. So it's kind of like I'm going to take it's looking at whole body protein synthesis versus the muscle protein synthesis, or looking at, we see this effect in bone, so it must happen in muscle this way, or it happens in skin. Like you've got different structures in the brain that are responsible for the extent to which you're awake, your emotions, like the various structures of the limbic system, for instance. So it's going to depend on, where in the brain these effects are happening. I don't know about that particular receptor, what he's referring to be honest. Like I have to go. Let's see, he posted something else here. Let me see.
He says, in short, NAC as a relaxer/sleep promoter via this mechanism of anti-excitement of neurons. Haha, I know that I might have made a mess explaining that.
No, I totally got that. Yeah, that makes sense. No, I understood his question. So, but I'm.
Well, he just restated it to help me because I didn't get it.
Yeah. Oh, gotcha. I gotcha. Okay, so yeah, it's a good question. So here's that's sort of my take on like the science and like how well can we take that mechanism of binding a receptor and extrapolate that to basically the conscious level of perception. You got to know where it's happening. So can we take an effect on skin cells and extrapolate that to muscle cells? Not necessarily.
I see.
But can you take that effect on a receptor at the receptor level and extrapolate that to brain function? Not necessarily. I don't know where he's pulling that information from, because I don't even know about that mechanism or which receptor exactly he's talking about per se. There's so many receptors. They're finding new receptors in the brain for neurotransmitters and finding new things that transmit neurotransmitters they didn't know they were all the time. It's like it's the more we find out we know, the more we find out we don't know, which is just beautiful. But here's the bottom line. Well, there's one thought before I get to that. N-acetylcysteine is an antioxidant. It does. There are some studies showing it does have those negative effects if you take large doses on muscle growth.
Oh yeah.
The way around that potentially is timing. So if you train in the morning, you set in motion all those molecular signals for the muscle growth. You've initiated everything. You might be able to take something like this at night and not have an issue.
Yeah. It's
got like a 10 or 12 hour half-life or something like that. I mentioned in my book, I note the value there. So maybe it's 6 to 8. Anywhere, it's not, it doesn't, you don't take a dose of N-acetylcysteine. It's not hanging around for days or weeks. So there's some timing that you could do to get around a mega dosing effect. But the other proof that's in the pudding is, does it make you feel tired? Like, I mean, really, like, do you need to know necessarily that it's going to do that? Because it's actually, can you get N-acetylcysteine? That was taken off the market because
no, it was never taken off
with COVID.
It was never taken off the market. Not yet, at least. The FDA is making a push to take it off the market and make it a prescription only. And so because Amazon wants to be politically correct and wants to be in cahoots with the government and be its little bitch, it took it off of Amazon. But you can still get NAC everywhere.
Okay. I didn't know. Not on Amazon, but other places.
Just not on Amazon. So, go somewhere else, guys.
All right.
And keep buying it. Buy the shit out of it. As an American, you should. You should.
Let's see if we can get this one taken down. Let's piss off the people at Amazon. Oh, man. I know someone who works for Amazon. Anyway.
Give him the finger for me about NAC.
Okay, I will.
Yeah.
I'll tell her in German to go screw herself. Yeah. there's some really funny ways to say "kiss my butt" in German.
Can you name one of them right now?
Ja, ich kann mal auf Deutsch sagen. Du kannst mich mal kreuzweise Sprachen vor mich am Arsch stecken.
What he said.
It means you can kiss my ass crossways and by making a spiral. You lick my butt, so it's kind of like do it this way and that way too. It's pretty, it's very visual. But I'm not saying go and like buy a bottle of or like a big packet of NAC powder and like down it and see if it knocks you out.
Yeah.
But we could take the dose, try it. I don't know. There's variability as to whether taking with food or with food increases absorption or bioavailability. So he might try taking it like a night when he's hasn't eaten for a while, or in the mornings when he's not going to train, where he might have a nap. Sunday you can take a nap on a Sunday. Don't miss the podcast, of course, but you could do it that way and test it out and see if it has an effect.
Yeah.
On his sleep. Not potentially a bad thing if you're gonna take something like that. Not a bad time to take it if you train early and take it away from your training and helps you sleep. It helps you with your recovery. Sounds like it could be a pretty good deal. But I don't know. It's not that I know. I don't know of anyone who's said I love to take N-acetylcysteine, but it makes me tired.
Yeah. Yeah, I've never heard that. And I think you're getting to an interesting point here that you find things out just simply by experience and that people would say across the board, you could take like P5P on the other hand and be like, hey, I find that it helps me with rest, whether you realize it or not. Mm-hmm. It's like you can start drawing those conclusions just by taking it, if that makes I don't know.
Yeah, no, you like literally. I mean, that's there's so many things too. I mean, there could even be biological individuality there. Some people like diphenhydramine, Benadryl.
Yeah,
I'll knock you makes right a lot of people really. Not everyone though. I know people who it doesn't make them. They take it because for their allergies, and they're like, just plod along through the day. I'm like, I wouldn't be able to do. I mean, my allergies would be better, but I'd just be lying in bed asleep because that stuff makes me so tired.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, so that's something to consider. You could go and look and find those papers if they haven't been retracted or what have you. They should report side effects, hopefully, and you can see if somnolence or fatigue is a side effect of dosing that. Because I don't know what doses they used in any of that research.
All right.
But that would be one way to look and see if someone else has reported that, because I haven't heard of that before. But I like you digging in the way he did. That's very, very cool.
Yeah.
Sometimes you get so deep in the rabbit hole, you're looking for. It's almost like you go to your electrical panel, you start checking your breakers, and like you call the electrical company. It's like my light won't come on. I'm like, did you try the switch? It's like, oh yeah, never mind, it works. It's like, just take it and figure it out. Who cares what the research might say necessarily, as long as you're not endangering yourself.
Yeah.
Just try it out.
Well, with that said, we should get out of here, Scott. I know it's Mother's Day as we record this. You've got some stuff to do. You've got plans for the day. I've got plans for the day, too. So, and any mothers out there, happy Mother's Day to you. Thanks for watching.
Yeah, Victoria's a dog mom, so happy dog mom.
I will pass that message on to her. Guys, go to byobbcoach.com. You can find Scott's book over there. You can get the hardcover. If you go over to, don't go to Amazon. You can go to Barnes & Noble. It's there too, isn't it?
Yes, Barnes & Noble, yep. And you'll see a picture
Amazon today.
You'll see a picture of this amazing dog. I'm trying to get my finger there.
Rusty?
Did you see in the picture? Rusty,
yes.
Yep, he's there on that front. Someone asked, if that was my Tinder picture.
I saw that. That
I'm like, no. Tinder's the only dating site I have not tried. There's my boy.
Yes.
Here he is. Because that's not not at all what I'm looking for. But I may have used that picture on a dating site. Who knows? I've tried them all. Strike.
Well, with that said, too, go to truenutrition.com. You can use our code THINK, which somebody mentioned in here. Yeah, you can get EAAs from True Nutrition. They've got a couple different things. They've got like the flavored EAAs, or you can get, like I go, the just raw bulk method, which you got to understand, they don't taste good. EAAs are not easy to flavor, but you can flavor them yourself with some Crystal Light. I find that works out just fine. And you want to mix it real thin anyway. A lot of water with
they have the instant tides too there, right?
Yeah, they do.
People miss it. Yeah, that works. I think that mixes better.
Yeah, I think that they have the instantized, and then they also have like a product, EAA Plus, it's called, and it has like a really good mango flavor. So you can go that route if you want. And of course, go to supplementsource.ca in Canada, where you could buy NAC or EAC. You can get whatever you want over there. It's Canada, it's land of the free, kind of.
And Efferton.
And yeah, there you go. All right, guys, we'll see you soon. Thanks, Scott.
Adios.